Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Coleman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is our match preview of Fulham's match against Crystal Palace. It'll be our three keys to victory for Fulham against Crystal Palace. And this is now has turned into a huge match, and we're going to talk about it. I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes, however long. Tony and I want to keep going. We enjoy talking Fulham, so we'll keep it going. I do want to mention that this show will be, as a podcast, only available on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. If you're interested on becoming a member of the Cottage Talk Patreon page and you're watching this, please do subscribe. And I have the scroll underneath this live video. It's patreon.com/Cottage Talk. Please do become a member. We do a lot of stuff here, including previews. Like I said, podcast is exclusive here. All right. Tony, on short notice, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Pleasure. Really good to be back, Russ, and looking forward to getting into it.
Right. So let's get into it. Before we get into talking about Marco's presser, there are a couple of interesting tidbits from that I want to talk to you about, and then we'll break down the match. Let's start with just your opening thoughts of Fulham heading into this match against Crystal Palace. What's going through your mind? How important is this? And then we could talk about Crystal Palace. Well, let's just talk about the importance of this match for Fulham on Sunday.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously they're going up against a side that, in my opinion, are in good form, very good defensively, and it's going to be really interesting to see how, if Fulham can take the last 35 minutes of Tuesday night into Saturday and actually start on the front foot and take the game to Palace, which is going to be very interesting because, had we not had that 35-minute spell on Tuesday night, and look, bearing in mind we still lost the game, Russ.
Yeah.
The first 55 minutes was absolutely abysmal. And, if Fulham don't play with the intensity that they need and defend like they defended in that first 55 minutes against a side that will hurt you and have players that, can cause you all kinds of problems, especially from midfield areas, and obviously Mateta, although Mateta hasn't actually scored against Fulham, believe it or not. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see whether they can take the confidence of that last 35 minutes and apply it from the first minute against Palace, who, did us twice at home last season, once in the league, once in the FA Cup. And we didn't register a goal against them actually in either of those games. So it's going to be, and also you've got to take into consideration, they've got the second best defensive record in the league after Arsenal. They've got 8 clean sheets out of 14 games. So to break them down and to get in behind them, Marco Silva has to set us up in a way that we're able to achieve that.
Okay, and we will talk about that coming up, but I just want to focus on playing Crystal Palace. And I think supporters forget because they just remember the last 2 losses to Crystal Palace. We did beat them at Selhurst Park. Now, I've heard the argument they were missing X, Y, and Z, as you would say, right? I get that. We still beat them against this manager. So don't tell me you cannot beat this manager at Craven Cottage, Tony. And I think a lot will be determined by how Fulham are set up and how they play, and if they can match the intensity of Crystal Palace. I think that was an issue in both of the matches that they've lost, is that this team is very well drilled. The thing about it is I think you're going to know exactly how to play against them. It's, can you have the right plan to play against it, and can you go out and execute the way you need to play? That's the way I'm looking at it. I think that they're beatable. I know how good they are, but I think, listen, if you beat them last season, Tony, why can't you beat them this season? I know the players are a little bit different. There's still an opportunity here.
Absolutely. And as I said, it comes back to how Fulham approach the game. It's how brave Marco Silva wants to be. And, we know what Crystal Palace strengths are. They've shown it this season. They showed it all of last season, and ultimately, Munoz and Mitchell on the wings, or how they play in that 4, because they obviously play 3 at the back. There is opportunities to pin them back and not allow them to get forward. Obviously, you don't want to get Kamada and Pina on the ball because those two make things happen for them. And Mateta, he's a physical specimen, so he's very physical, and it's going to be really important that Bassey and Anderson marshal that. And I think their back three are very good. They're very strong central defenders, and I think if you leave Raul isolated up there on his own, evening Chris, then it's going to be a very, very difficult afternoon for him because those three will marshal him pretty easily. So it's really important that Chukwueze and Wilson are deployed slightly higher up the pitch, and I expect both of them to start on Sunday without any shadow of a doubt. And it's important that we play almost like a three, Russ, if you like. But again, it's all going to come down to how Marco Silva approaches the game and the mindset of the players. The work ethic has to match Crystal Palace, has to match it. If we fall 10% off that, we're in for a very long afternoon, as you saw the other night against Manchester City for 55 minutes.
Right, Tony. And that's why, listen, the players showed up. Listen, they showed up for the entire match, but I think, and we'll talk about this, I think that they were hamstrung by how they were set up against Manchester City. Adjustments were made. I mean, listen, certainly have to blame the players. I mean, obviously, but once the substitutions and that really went through and things changed, Fulham played very well against Manchester City. So it is possible to play like that against Crystal Palace. But I'll go back to this. If they go with the attitude that they can just show up and basically force their will on Crystal Palace, that's not going to work. Or if they're going to take the mindset that they're going to play a cagey match, I don't think that's going to work. I think that they have to have the right mindset to take it to this team, understand the threats, but not be passive. That's the way I'm approaching it. Do you think that is the right approach before we go and talk about Marco's presser?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to be. And I think we've seen it in the Sunderland game, prior to that. And it shows that and the Tottenham game as well, if Marco Silva approaches the game with a little bit more intensity and bravery and, does away with this notion that playing two holding midfielders actually works when it quite clearly doesn't. And it certainly doesn't work against free-flowing, attacking, aggressive sides like Manchester City, like Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
Then, you know what? You give yourself a chance to get into the game. But if you start the game in defensive mind, then, what you're doing is you're inviting that pressure on, Russ. Yep. And Fulham are not good enough defensively to invite pressure on. They're just not good enough.
So I know what you just said about Mateta, but he scares the hell out of me because Mateta is a player, like you said, if you give him the opportunity to get him involved, I'm just telling you, he's going to hurt Fulham. So I think the best way to do that is to go on the offensive here against this team and match. Not just, we're going to talk about work ethic, and Matt from the View from the Hammersmith End has a question for us that we'll get to when we really break down the match. Thank you, Matt, for that. I definitely gonna talk to Tony about that. That's a good one, and we'll get to that, especially when we talk about the starting 11. That's when I really want to get to that. So hang tight with that question you have for us, Matt. But I think the approach is going to be a lot to this, not just of the players, but the coach. What is going to be the approach, and how are they going to, the players, execute the approach? So only time is going to tell. I know how I would do it, and we'll talk about it. We'll definitely get to it. So let's get to Marco's presser, okay? Before we talk about some of the quotes that involve Berg and Lukic, let's just talk about something that we knew was going to be happening, Tony, and it's that we're going to be losing 3 players to the African Cup of Nations. They're going to be leaving before Fulham play Newcastle United in the Carabao Cup. This is a blow, Tony. This is an absolute blow. Marco confirmed that.
Yeah, obviously it's a huge disadvantage because it's 3 players that Fulham need. Ultimately, especially Chukwueze, who's come in, he's lit the place on fire. He's got fans excited, and he's actually a very good footballer. Bassey, although he hasn't been as consistent maybe defensively as he was last year, he's still very reliable. He's still there, and you need him. And obviously Iwobi, everything pretty much goes for him. So losing those three players is a huge blow, and it will have an impact. No question about it. And it's just bad luck, really. It's just bad luck, bad timing. It is what it is. Marco Silva would have known this right at the beginning of the season, and I'm hoping that the provisions that they'll put in place to manage it. And I think we've got enough quality within the group, I think, to get by. But obviously, it's not going to be the three players that you'd rather have out there, doing the job. So yeah, it's going to be a tough period for Fulham, but they're going to have to find a way to manage it.
Totally agree, Tony. Listen, the one thing that I've learned over the course of the season, especially, I'm going to even say all the way up to the Manchester City match, I think it really showed itself in the Manchester City match. You know what I hear all the time is Fulham's talent compared to, say, a team like Manchester City, a team like Liverpool, Tottenham, that have much more talent. I think that we are not giving Fulham enough credit for the talent that they have, because if they can raise their talent level to play against teams like this and play the way they did, I know we're talking about those 30 plus minutes, 30, 35 plus minutes plus stoppage time. They can do that. Then they can play with anyone. That's what I've learned. Losing these three players hurts, but I think there's enough to not just get by while they're gone, but even in the Carabao Cup, I think it's enough. He just has to find the right players to cover themselves while these players are gone. Cuenca, obviously, for Bassi, right? The big question, obviously, is going to be the Chukwueze situation, because he's fortunately taking him away is going to hurt. The Iwobi one's bigger, Tony. The Iwobi one, I think, we're going to talk about coming up the Berga Lukic situation, but Iwobi's loss, I think, is how do you overcome that?
Well, I think how you overcome it, Russ, is that players are going to have to step up. Kevin will get a better opportunity now, but he's going to have to step up. He's going to have to step up his performances, and actually, I think Emil Smith-Rowe can come in and do that Iwobi job in the middle of the park. No question at all. Again, he just needs game time. We saw it the other night. He definitely looks fitter, sharper. He seems like he's got his head in the right place now. And, he's basically, and we said this last week, Russ, he's asking Marco Silva questions now. He's saying, look, I'm here. I want to play. I want to be a part of this. And he's letting his football do the talking, Russell. And that's so important. When footballers are being, scrutinized because they're not performing or they're underperforming or whatever, they have to let their football do the talking. And to be honest with you, I think Emil Smith-Rowe in the last 2 or 3 games has absolutely done that.
I agree with that, Tony. We'll obviously be talking about Emil Smith-Rowe, Josh King, that whole situation as we go and talk about the starting 11. Some decisions need to be made. Will he go back to Berga and Lukic? It's a possibility, and we're going to talk about that because there's some interesting quotes coming from Marco's press. I'm going to share them in twofold, right? So first I'm going to share this one, okay? And again, this is from Jack Kelly, who was at the presser. So this is part one. He says, again, Silva on fans saying Lukic, Berga too defensive. Quote, this is from Marco. Okay, that's their opinion. Silva follows that up. Quote, if the people see it that way, then no worries. Now, what's interesting after that is that there are more quotes, Tony, after that go along with that. Just give me a second while I pull up those, because that's the beginning part. I could not get it together on one clip. This is also from Jack Kelly, so I'm going to share that as well. He says this is from Marco. Silva, quote, I don't make decisions by the opinion of the people. I make them based on what I see in the sessions. What is my idea? Because I'm the manager, unquote. So that's what Marco said. What do you make of that? And again, listen, I didn't hear it. I'm just going based on the quotes. So I don't know exactly the tone of it. These are just words. So I just want to keep that in mind as we talk about that. What do you make of those quotes?
Yeah, look, I think obviously football is a game of opinions, Russ, right? Everyone's got an opinion. Marco Silva is not stupid, and he's not naive enough to sit there and think, okay, having watched what I watched the other night for 55 minutes, he will clearly know that playing Sanderberg and Lukic in those holding midfield roles didn't work. It didn't work. What you do on a training pitch and what then you transfer into reality in a football game on a Saturday afternoon against opposition are two different things. Marco Silva doesn't have to explain himself.
No.
He is the manager. He gets paid the big bucks to make the tough decisions, but he has to live and die by the decisions he makes, Russ. And ultimately, listen, paying fans are going to have an opinion, and they're going to make, they're going to say it's not working. But if you understand football, or you know anything about football, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that the other night it didn't work. And in other games this season, it hasn't worked, because the results have showed it hasn't worked. And the goals that we've conceded shows it hasn't worked, because they're there to protect our back four. Ultimately, that's what they're there for.
That's the reason.
Goals for fun. So ultimately, he knows that. Now, I would say that if he lines up on Sunday with Sasha Lukic and Sanderberg again, I think that is just pure arrogance, in my opinion. That is him just being stubborn and arrogant. And it will cost him the game, in my opinion. It will cost him the game.
Okay, so we're going to get to that when we talk about the starting 11. I'm going to second that, okay? I hope he doesn't do it, but I understand, as you said, listen, he's the manager. He's the one calling the shots. He should be the one, okay? Absolutely. But I think as fans, we have a right to question decisions. I mean, that's what you do. That's what football's about, opinions, as you always tell me, right? I have a right to my opinion. Ultimately, he's the one that makes the decisions. He's seeing them in training. He has to live and die with those decisions. It's his decisions ultimately. But don't tell me I can't make an opinion on it, because I think I have a right. Listen, I listened to another podcast that made a similar opinion to us. So it's not just you and me. It's, listen, and I know if Matt is listening, I'll just say to Matt actually looked at it differently. He understood what Marco was trying to do against Manchester City with Berg and Lukic. So I give Matt credit for sharing his views. We all aren't going to agree, but I think we have a right to talk about it. And Marco is the one that ultimately makes the decisions, Tony. So that's what's interesting. What will he do? That we will find out on Sunday. If he does Berg and Lukic together, I'll look at it and I'll say it's a mistake. If he doesn't and goes with something that we're looking more towards with, say, Iwobi and Smith Rowe and Berga, or Iwobi, Smith, Iwobi, sorry, boy, I'm pulling a Major Goldman, Iwobi, King, and then Berga, then that to me is the direction I would go. I don't know if that's what he's going to do. And ultimately, we're going to find out. I just want to just share this from our friend Chris. The approach should be brave Silva. However, I fear once again, safe Silva is going to be engaged. We will find out on Sunday, Chris. That's why we're talking about it. All right, Tony, let's get to talking about the match. Before we go to 3 keys to victory, share me your thoughts overall on Crystal Palace.
Yeah, well, like I said, they are a side that is in good form. They're 5th, I think, in the table. We know their strengths. We know their weaknesses. As I said earlier in the show, they've got the 2nd most clean sheets in the league, and that's always important. That shows that defensively they're very well organised. They're a very physical side, as you know. Mateta's a handful. He'll put himself around. They've got midfield players that will battle and work really hard. So again, it's really important that we match that and we have those energy levels. And I think Matt talked about work ethic.
Yep.
The work ethic on Sunday has to be absolutely spot on from 1 to 11, regardless of who starts, who doesn't start, whatever. The work ethic has to be there. They're also very good out of possession of the ball. Their shape is very good.
Yep.
They work in unison. They keep their lines well. And they're quite a difficult team to break down. And I think that what Fulham have to be aware of is their transitions. They transition very well into counter-attacking football.
Quick.
And that's where they can be really dangerous, especially with the two, wide players. So we have to be switched, and our fullbacks have to be really on it, as well. But the one area that really concerns me and where we have to be really switched on is set pieces, Russ. They are very strong from set pieces.
Okay.
And we know that is our little bit of our Achilles heel at times.
Oh.
So that is one area that could come back and bite us if we're not strong in those areas.
Okay. Ben chimes in. Don't think Silva will play the two holding midfielders. It was proven on Tuesday that it doesn't work. Well, Ben, you're like Tony and myself. We agree with that, but we'll see what ends up happening. All right. Tony, let's go to 3 keys to victory. I'll get us going. I came up with my 3, and then you can come up with your 3 as well. So it's funny you talked about Mateta, but I'm going to bring him up because my number 3 is do not let Mateta beat you. I'm not just talking about scoring goals. I'm affecting the game. I think that this player, you're talking about transition. This player scares me in situations like this. So for me, this is about the back 4 and not letting this player just run crazy in Fulham's box. I mean, they need to keep this player under control, whether he scores, whether he sets up other players. I got a big concern about not letting this player beat us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's definitely somebody that, as I said, we have to either man mark or make sure that we keep quiet as often as possible as we can. I'm going on the reverse of that, and I'm saying that Daniel Muniz is the one for me that we have to be careful of because of where he plays and because of the runs he makes. And because
I remember him from last year.
He's very direct, he's very dangerous, and he's the player that drags them up the pitch, and he will any opportunity he gets to get our fullbacks, he will take. And he gets to the byline and he drives balls. He drives balls across, and we have to stop him more so than the other side. We have to stop that delivery coming in, and we paid the price for it the other night against Manchester City for our fullbacks not engaging quick enough and stopping those balls coming in. We have to stop balls from wide areas coming into our box.
Okay. I want to share this, and I should have brought this to the table too, but Ben brings one of the keys to victory for me is win the midfield battle. I totally agree with that. I should have mentioned that in my keys to victory. My number 2 goes back to intensity, matching their intensity, Tony. And if you do not play with the same intensity as Crystal Palace, I think, like you said, they're just going to destroy us on transition. They are going to take advantage of a player that you just mentioned could really do damage against us. What is your thoughts on that, and what's your number 2?
Yep, good point. Absolutely. Intensity is always key in any football match, to be honest. But yes, we absolutely have to match them in every area. And going back to Benjamin's point, because absolutely my second key was
midfield.
About not just the midfield battle, but it depends on what midfield that Marco Silva goes with.
Yeah,
that will determine for me how we approach the game. So yes, obviously, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking because of the physicality that Crystal Palace pose, he may well go with Sander Berge and Sasha Lukic just because of that, that in mind. However, if you want to affect a team like Crystal Palace offensively and you want to keep them on the back foot, so not encourage them to drive forward, then you have to play players in there that are technically good on the ball, that want to get into spaces, that want to break lines, that want to work through transitions. And for me, then you've got to go with a bit more of an attacking threat in there by being brave. So whilst it's about winning the midfield battle, yes, it is, but it's also being brave in midfield and making good decisions in order for us to get on the front foot and attack them.
Right, because, I mean, playing against a team like this, isn't going to be harder to beat them wide? You're going to have to beat them in the middle?
Yeah, well, look, because of the 3 central defenders that they play, they obviously work within the 18-yard box. So, the 2 wide players for them obviously will be up and down and basically covering those holes. But Glasner showed that it works for them. He's drilled it into them that they are very good at what they do. And that's the reason why they're in Europe. fifth in the league currently and actually having a great couple of seasons because he's got them so well disciplined, and every player in that team knows their job and they basically carry it out pretty much every week. So in order for Fulham to affect them, I think we have to worry about what Fulham are going to do to Crystal Palace rather than worrying about what Crystal Palace are going to do to us. Yeah. And I think that's where Marco Silva went wrong on Tuesday. He was more worried about what Manchester City were going to do than worrying about actually how can Fulham affect Manchester City and go and win the game.
Okay. And that's going to lead to my number one. And it is pretty often Marco has to win the coaching battle. And I'm glad that you brought me there because you took the words right out of my mouth. This to me is about how can Fulham take advantage of issues that they can with Crystal Palace. And that's down to how Marco sets Fulham up. How is he going to set Fulham up? And how is he going to put the players in the best position to succeed? Are you going to be more worried about Crystal Palace stopping them? Or are you going to be more worried about taking it to this team and finding the weaknesses and taking advantage of Crystal Palace? That, to me, is going to be how this match is going to play itself out. We will see a part of it in the starting 11, but it will also have to do with intent, how the game plan plays out. This cannot be safe Silva for me. It has to be a Silva that is going to be taking chances. It's got to be a Silva that's going to be brave, Tony. For me, he has to win the coaching battle.
Yeah, obviously really, really important. My number one, Russ, is going back to our defence. And what fans seem to have forgotten is, even with the amazing game that we played the other night and what a comeback it was and all of that, euphoric stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
We lost the game. We still lost the game and we conceded 5 goals, Russ, at home. And people will forget that because it was covered over by the fact that we managed to score 4 and we had this amazing, comeback. But ultimately, we conceded 5 appalling goals and we were a defensive shambles and it was an embarrassment up until that point. So, you cannot forget that. And so for me, our number one key to victory is defensively, we have to be a lot more solid than we were the other night. Because if we are as open and as ill-disciplined as we were, then Crystal Palace will punish us. They will punish us. And it will end up being a 3-0 loss because the other thing you've got to realise is in the 14 games that Palace have played this season, I think that there's only 2 games where they haven't conceded a first half goal. So, they are very, very, very good defensively. And we are going to have to be very good going forward, but also very solid at the back.
Okay. Basically, they have to play a complete game to beat this team. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's a possibility. I'm going to say a good possibility. Okay,
100%, and we've shown that.
Listen, if you can play like that against Manchester City, you can. I'll even say Tottenham, right? I could talk about some of the matches, even going back to the Chelsea match. If you play a certain way, even though the results didn't go our way, you sure as hell can do this against Crystal Palace. They're difficult. But the thing that I keep saying to myself, I keep going back to the match at Selhurst Park. I know who was missing, but I go back to that. There's going to be no secrets here, Tony. Marco should know how to beat this team because Gloucester's not going to show him anything that he doesn't already know. The question is, what will Marco come up with? What will Marco do to put his players in the best situation to succeed? Will he do it? And will the players be able to do it? So that to me is what it comes down to. Okay. So let's go to the starting 11. Before I do that, I want to go back. I want to basically go back to the comment from co-host Matt Wall, who was on View from the Hammersmith end. If you haven't watched or listened to that show, Matt is fantastic on that show. And I'm lucky to have him as part of Cottage Talks. So here's a comment before we go through our starting 11. Let's just start here. It'll probably shape our starting 11, but let's go ahead and do this. Matt says, given the work ethic needed, ESR or King, ladder for me, meaning he's going King. If you had to choose, this is interesting because I know what I ultimately want to do at some point to play them both together. But if you had to choose against this opponent, who are you going with? It's a great question.
Yeah, of course, it's a great question, and based on the season so far and the way that Josh King has been playing, then obviously you're going with Josh King.
I'm going Josh King.
You know, I still think, Russ, if you want to go on to our starting 11,
let's go. I
still think there's an argument that both of these players can play for Fulham Football Club in the same team at the same time in midfield. And if I was managing on Sunday against Crystal Palace,
give me your starting 11.
I would be going, well, the back four, providing Tete is okay. I'm sure. I mean, Silva hasn't said anything about.
He hasn't said anything.
So that was a very strange, decision at half time. But anyway, I assume he's fit. So for me, it's going to be the same back five: Leno, Tete, Anderson, Bassi, Sessegnon. Although I don't think the two centre halves, covered themselves in any glory the other night. And don't be surprised if he maybe rests one of them and maybe throws a Cuenca in there or a Diop in there. It wouldn't surprise me. But I'm going with that back five.
Okay.
But then this is where I would be changing it up, Russ. I would take Sander Berger and Sasha Lukic out of the equation.
Totally.
Put them on the bench. Totally out of the equation.
Okay, I know where you're going.
Iwobi, Smith-Rowe, King, Chukwueze, Wilson, Raul.
Wow. Okay, wow.
That would be my starting 11.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'm ready for that at some point, but I wouldn't do it in this match. So basically I'm going to do similar to you. Back five picks itself, as you said. I'm going to go Chukwueze on the left, Wilson on the right, Raul up front. I'm going to go with Berger, Iwobi, and I'm going to go with Josh King. So that's what I'm going to do. I hear what you're saying. I think that's what I would do. I think that gives you a good platform, and then have Emil Smith-Rowe come on in the second half. That's what I would do. So let's now talk about what we think Marco's going to do. Tony, let's try to predict what we think Marco's going to do. I think we're both in agreement. We know what he's going to do with his back five, right? What do you think he's going to do with his wings? Let's start there before we talk about the middle.
I think because of Palace's physicality, Russ, I think he's going to stick with Berger and Lukic in there. I do.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be more out of his stubbornness to say, do you know what? I'm not going to be told by fans. I'm not going to be told by anybody. The other night was just a bad day at the office for 55 minutes. And you know what? I expect, because Sasa Lukic had an absolutely appalling game, as you know.
Yeah.
And he's going to be expecting a lot more from those players. And actually, that they should want to put that right, that first 55 minutes right from the other night. So
yeah,
I think he will give them the opportunity to do that. And I think he will go with those two. But I think rather than start Smith-Rowe, I think he will go with King back in there. And I think Chukwueze will come back in. Okay.
Now, I agree with that. I agree with that totally. I think that's exactly what he's going to do. Okay. What you're predicting. And you and I talked about this, and I mentioned this to Matt Wall when we do view from the Hammersmith end. I truly believe that Marco's plan against Man City was to get us to around the 60th minute and then make this change with bringing on Chukwueze and doing all that. But I think actually I think he'll play Iwobi out there, Tony. I think he'll sit Chukwueze, if I'm being honest. Because if he does the Berger and Lukic, he is playing Iwobi. So then Chukwueze's coming off the bench. So I agree with you. I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to do this. I think he's absolutely going to do this. I think he's going to play Berger, Lukic, King, Iwobi, and then Wilson on the right and Raul up front. And it's going to be the same team.
Don't be surprised if he doesn't start Josh King on Sunday. I wouldn't be surprised,
except for Josh King.
Just because, as I said, if he starts to think about the physicality of the opposition, you've got to remember Josh King is still only 18 years old.
Yeah.
And if he wants his midfield to be strong and physical, then King isn't necessarily the right option. And you could actually see Iwobi drop inside there with Berger and Lukic, and he could go with Chukwueze on the right. That's what I think he possibly
He could do that too. He could leave them both out and then
correct.
put
And then as the game transpires and as it rolls on, he's got Smith Rowe and King to come on.
Okay.
And
Okay.
maybe
I can see that.
Maybe.
Okay. I can see that. But again, that's what's interesting is that there are different ways he could go with this. But I think you and I are both in agreement that he is going to go back to Berg and Lukic. And I think it's, like you said, I can understand it on some ways, like you said, the physicality and matching them. I get that. But it stifles us in so many ways that I don't know. It's basically, you're telling me you want to get to a certain point. You want to get a certain point of the match, then you can change it. Then you can make your dramatic changes with your substitutions. But I think that's a dangerous game to play. To try to hold off this team for that long period of time and just hope that your defense is strong enough, Tony. And that's the issue. Are they strong enough for a counter? Are they strong enough? Could they get that sucker punch? My fear is that they could do all the right things and then get these sucker punches.
Yeah, listen, as I said, that you said it earlier in before about almost having to play the perfect game. Fulham will have to be near perfect on Sunday to get anything from the game. And Palace,
because this is a good team.
Yeah, and Palace will have to have an off day. They really will. Yeah. I mean, this is a good side that's in good form,
well drilled.
That's got that's very good defensively. And you know what? Fulham are going to have to play very, very well to get a result. They are capable. We know they're capable because we've seen they're capable. But again, it's that inconsistency, Russell. And, for hell's sure, they cannot start as badly as they did against Manchester City the other night, because you go a goal down or 2 goals down against Crystal Palace, they're not letting you back in. They're not letting you back in. So it's so important that they start the game on the front foot, positively, work hard, and then obviously play in the right areas and make good decisions. That's the key.
Right. But again, this goes back to my thoughts on this, Tony. I think playing this really ultra conservative is going to backfire if that's the direction he goes, because this is a team that knows who they are. All their players know exactly how Glasner wants them to play. They are a machine in a way, right? Each piece is feeding off of each other. So when you're playing someone like that, one, you're certainly going to know how they're going to play, so you should know how to play against it. But if you are going to set up a certain way, and this is a team that will hurt you because of the way that they are, you got to show them something that they're not ready for. I go back to Man City. Man City wasn't ready for that in the second half. I know that you've talked, and we've talked about taking their foot off the gas, and I get all that, but to the level that we played, the fact that we had more possession than Man City tells me that even Pep was taken back by what Fulham did in that second half. There's a possibility to do that here again, but they have to play above their level. And as you said, I agree with you on this. Crystal Palace have to go below their level, because they're a very good team. You're going to have to beat them. This is a match you're going to have to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves.
Russ, momentum is everything in football, as you know. Yeah, it's all about momentum. Yeah. And, Man City had bags of it, obviously, in that first 55 minutes. And then in the second half, like I say, if you drop your levels and then the other side gets a sniff and ups their levels and then gets a bit of momentum, it takes the game in a different way. And that's exactly what happened on Tuesday night. Yep. Again, I can't break away from the fact that at the end of the day, we still conceded 5 goals at home. Regardless of everything else that happened, we still conceded 5 goals. And they weren't, they were 4 out, I'll give it maybe 4 out of the 5 were just shocking and could have all been avoided. Yeah. So defensively, once again, Fulham have to do better. They have to be better.
Yep. I totally agree, my friend. And they have to play at a very high level to beat Crystal Palace. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's possible. So let's end with going to our predictions that, after we're talking about what we think Silva's going to do, what we're talking about Crystal Palace. Ultimately, what do you and I think? And if you're watching live, we have a good amount, 90 people watching live. If you can, shoot us a prediction. I'll try to get to it before we end the show. Tony, give me your prediction. I'll share mine.
Well, I mean, based on the other night, it's impossible to predict anything these days, isn't it? But no, based going with my head and the realistic option, I can't see Fulham winning this game, Russ. I just can't. The way that Palace have been playing, their solidarity at the back, very good on the counter, and how poorly we defended the other night. And I don't know. I think we're going to end up losing 2-1, Russ, unfortunately. That's how I see it going.
Okay. I often like to try to separate my head from my heart, right? I think in this case, maybe I'm thinking a little bit of both, but I am thinking, I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I am thinking that even though I think that he's going to play the Bergen-Lukic combination, I think the players have a lot of momentum, even though they lost from that match, confidence that they can come and take it to Crystal Palace. Now, they're not exactly the same, Tony, but everyone thought something similar against Sunderland. Now, Crystal Palace are a much better side. I think we can agree. But Fulham had struggled against the way Sunderland set up. The way that they, that setup usually really kills Fulham. And they figured it out a little bit. So I'm probably going a little bit too much with my heart. I'm going 2-1 to Fulham. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to say 2-1 to Fulham. Russ Goldman will probably be wrong again, but at least
let's hope not.
I hope I'm right, man. I hope I'm right, because the thing that's frustrating about watching this team right now is, again, there have been so many moments that you're thinking, if just this happened or that happened, we'd have a lot more points. I keep going back to the Chelsea match, and there have been other matches like this that they're this close. At some point, I think they're going to break down the door. I wouldn't call beating Sunderland at home breaking down the door. Beating Crystal Palace at home, that's breaking down the door. So I'm taking my shot. I'm going 2-1, Tony. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and I think that, listen, as I said, it will be. I think it will be a very tight game. I think there won't be much in it. But look, as I said to you, pre Sunderland, I said that the next 4 games, and that's Sunderland, Tottenham, Man City, and Palace. If we come out of those 4 games with 6 points, we would have done well. We've already got the 6 points, Russ, and we've got a free hit on Sunday.
I know.
So, look, if we get anything out of the game on Sunday, it will be a great, it will be a really good result. Whether it's a point, if it's 3 points, even better. But as I said, just because of the way Crystal Palace have been playing, because of their defensive structure, I just think that it's a big ask for Fulham, having conceded 5 the other night against Manchester City, who obviously have far better quality in terms of what they have in the final third with the quality they have, but Palace are not far off that. And they really did cause us a lot of problems, and I just see them causing us a lot of problems.
Okay, I'm just going to mention this while we're talking about this. I keep going back to this match at Selhurst Park. Do you know who played very well at Selhurst Park? One player's not here, and that was Reece Nelson. If you remember, Reece Nelson played well. So Chukwueze could be key if he starts Chukwueze. Do you know who else played well? I'm changing my mind. It's not going to be Josh King. Emile Smith-Rowe played well.
Yeah, he did.
Against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, if you remember correctly. So I'm changing them. Russ Goldman has a right to change his mind. I'm going with Emile Smith-Rowe to start. So that's what I'm going to do. But anyways, I always like to change my mind. Great show, Tony. Thank you so much for joining me at last.
No, thank you for having me, and great preview.
It really was, Tony. And like I said, love doing the show. And I love so many people are watching and listening with us. It means a lot to me personally, and that I can do the show with you, and that people seem to enjoy it. So thank you, everyone who watches and listens to Cottage. Thank you as always, Chris. And Chris, I don't know what you're going to do this week without the Patriots. Chris is a Patriots fan. So Chris, and before I go, Chris, I'm going to let you know this. I'm actually flying to Oklahoma next week, and I'm going to be on a plane coming back from Oklahoma to Boston, and I'm going to miss the Patriots game. Yes, Chris, I'm going to miss because I'm going to be on a stupid plane. So I just thought I would share that with you, Chris.
And they've got to get a result against Leeds tomorrow, Russ. Big time.
Yeah. Roof. Yeah. I hear you, Chris. I hear you. By the way, Chris, I don't know what is going on with your team, but we'll talk about Liverpool when we get to playing Liverpool. That's a whole thing. I heard something crazy today on the radio, Tony, before we go, because Chris is on, talking about, hey, would you switch managers with Real Madrid, Xabi Alonso for Arne Slot? Would you do a trade like that? I thought that was kind of funny, but listen, anything's possible. I'm sure Chris wouldn't mind seeing Xabi Alonso back at Liverpool. Anyways, why am I talking about Liverpool to end this effing show? Enough. My name is Russ Coleman. He's Tony Gold. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.